Okay, we're live. We're going to wait till the attendance kind of populates and fills up here. Good evening, everybody. Just want to check and see if my audio is doing okay. Check 1, 2, 3. Let me know, how is the audio, everyone out there in YouTube land or wherever you are. Mike B says, here to support my buddy Greg.
Yeah.
Mark Kearney. We have Ontario. Daniel Barnett just smoked a massive joint. Oh, the audio is good. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that.
I see Mike and Mark. Two names
Yep.
I know for sure.
Yep.
I want to say hi to those guys.
Definitely. And the attendance is growing. Patton is here. Ryan Carroll is here. Let's see, who else? Troy is here. Hey, Troy, what's going on? Mark again. Paul H. We'll get going when the attendance jacks up a little bit, so we don't have to repeat anything. And until then, we're just going to enjoy our... I'm going to enjoy my coconut water a little bit.
Yeah, I brought with me some, what was that? Is it Old Tennessee salt and caramel whiskey.
Oh, nice.
Kinda helps loosen the tongue. Loosen the tongue a little bit.
Man Talk says, now here's the real question of the night. Did George trim that man's beard? Actually, no. I am sure Greg trimmed his own beard. He is an aficionado of beards, and a lot of people know Greg, but we're not going to start yet. But Oscar says, I thought that was Rich Cooper for a second. Eddie Jackson says, good evening.
Well, one of these days, George, you will be trimming my beard, I'm sure. I want to work that out.
When I get to Florida, absolutely. We'll have to, actually, we'll do a video.
That would be cool.
We'll press record, and we'll set up a couple phones and on tripods, and we'll kind of make that happen.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yep, that'd be great.
I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be a really good collaboration right there.
Old Carolina Pipe Cottage is with us. There's a gentleman who's going to be opening up a brick and mortar pipe tobacco store, kind of a man store in the world of retail, online stuff. This guy's actually going to open up a brick and mortar place where human beings can actually interact, which is kind of rare. TJ is in the house, my childhood friend. Am I wearing blue light blocking glasses? No, these are my regular progressive lens. I have a 10% amber tint, and that helps me when I'm online, which I am a lot. Christopher Pierce says, peace and love, gentlemen. Knowledge is power. It sure is. Mark's 52nd birthday is tomorrow. That's good. That's all good news.
Yeah, happy birthday, Mark. So you're 1 year older than me.
Kevin Smith says, an analog man cave. Yeah, a brick and mortar store is an analog man cave. Yeah, that's right.
A safe haven.
It sure is. It sure is. You know, it's kind of funny. There's this one place where I used to get cigars, and I haven't been there in a while. And they have a cigar lounge in the back, and you pay a certain amount a month. And you go there, and everybody has like lockers, and they keep their whiskey and their glasses in there. And there's like a little kitchen where you can wash your glassware or whatever. And there's guys that order pizzas, and they go there and they, you know, but it wasn't it wasn't like a sports kind of place. It wasn't like when you go to a lot of these cigar bars, you see they have a sports game on and everyone's staring at a screen. And I
Right.
loved this place because it was men talking. I heard
Mm-hmm.
like what sounded like a meeting going on. When I walked into the back, there was at least 20 guys sitting in leather chairs, leather sofas, this big lounge area, and actually having conversations and not staring at a screen. And I was like,
Right.
what is this? I haven't seen this in decades.
Right.
Men talking.
Yeah, that would be nice. That's I don't smoke a pipe or a cigar, but to be honest with you, that is one of the appealing things about it that makes me consider starting, because of that community that it seems
Yeah,
to draw. Um, I
that's
certainly have
right.
always loved your Beards Without Borders broadcast. I still watch the old ones. I still go back and watch the old ones. There's
There's,
something so relaxing about
I know
sitting
it.
there watching those, and it's crazy to me that you watch all these finely honed and groomed, not physically groomed, but these YouTubers that seem to have everything together, all the nice equipment, everything's very high tech, and they get a big audience. But then you in contrast, videos like mine, videos like yours are very low tech, and yet
Yep.
like your Beards Without Borders ones were just you sitting around talking off the cuff, nothing really rehearsed, and people love it. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things got me really thinking about doing this. Is that this is what people want? They want to be able to connect. You know?
You are right. Back in those days when I was doing that, I didn't even own a tripod. I was literally like
Oh man.
balancing my phone like on a brick and
Oh
or
really?
like a rubber band. I was doing stuff like driving a stake in the ground, putting my phone on the stake and holding it there with a rubber band, and then pressing record and then running back and in front of the camera. And I still don't even own a camera. I don't do
Right.
any editing on my laptop. Everything is done on my phone. And
Hmm.
so it's been 5 years with my Samsung Galaxy, and it's served me well. When everyone says, "Oh, you need to upgrade this and that," and you know, maybe I will,
Right.
but
Right.
I don't know. What do you record your videos on, Greg?
My phone. I'm like you. I do everything on my phone. Everything's in one take. However, that doesn't mean that I don't hit restart or stop and record over and over again. I do, but
Hmm.
but once I start talking, because I have zero editing skills,
Yeah,
and I did buy a laptop for the purpose of being able to do better editing. And to be honest with you, George, I still can't figure it out.
yeah.
So any editing that I do is very minimal, and I I'm a little. I'd like to know how you do some of yours. Of course, that's probably not a conversation for here right now,
I'll show you.
but
I'll show you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because I've looked at a whole bunch of different things, and I just am very inept when it comes to editing. But so I generally try to get everything done in one take, but I start over a bunch of times, a lot, and that's generally
Hmm.
why I keep my videos about 10 minutes too.
Yeah.
So that way I pretty much know what I'm going to say, and I can only mess up so much. But
Right.
you know,
That's
but
excellent.
I do have my, as far as what I actually record on, it's my phone, but I think I'm so low tech that my phone is, I think it's a Samsung A20. Oh, it's in the Galaxy series, but it's on the low end.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The camera on this thing is 1080i on front and back. And that's one of the reasons why I got it, because
Yeah.
it had a better camera on it than some of the more expensive phones
Yeah.
of, like, let's say Motorola. I thought it was equivalent to the iPhone, and in some cases I still think the iPhone probably has a better camera. I'm not sure, but I do want to get a new phone. This one's starting to slow down, starting to slog a little bit.
Yeah. I'm kind of feeling that myself. I'm
Yeah.
probably due for something different I'd say within the next year, I guess. It has served me
Oh, really?
well, and but this is the Samsung Galaxy Note 9, and I think they're up to like Note 20 by now or something like that. So
I think
I
you're
don't
right.
know. Yeah,
I do think you're right about
yeah.
that.
All right. Well,
I've been, huh?
let's get started here. Tonight we're talking about the joy of reading, and I follow Greg on Instagram and on YouTube, and you guys know Greg Boswell. I'm going to have Greg introduce himself. I mean, literally, most of you probably know Greg just by his look. He has an image that is unmistakable, and I do notice you have a little more gray in the beard than you did when I first knew of you, probably 4 or 5 years ago. So, yeah,
Yeah, 4 years
four.
ago.
Yep,
Yeah. It's
yep.
funny because the guys that work say the same thing. We do everything remote now, and we go in for a meeting maybe once every 4 or 5 months. And the last time I went in, the guys were like, "Man, you have a lot more gray in your beard now." It's like, really?
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, introduce yourself. I could never do as good of a job as you can in introducing yourself. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Greg Boswell, of course. You can probably see my name on the screen. Maybe you know. No, I guess you can't see my name on the screen. But anyway, Greg Boswell. For those of you who don't know, I live in Lakeland, Florida. It's smack dab in the center of Central Florida. So we sit between. I like to tell people we sit between um, Disney World on the east side, and not east side, but east of us, and Clearwater Beach to the west of us. So we're really easy to find. And I've been living here since 1986. I've got a family. We're a family of six, and I still have three kids living at home. They range in ages from 15 to 21. Well, 14 to 21. One's getting ready to turn 15. But I've been making YouTube videos for about 4 years. And yes, George was one of my inspirations for doing it. My kids were another one. And I never foresaw myself doing this, let alone beard videos or anything else like that. And so I've just been able to use YouTube as a platform for speaking on things that I care about, and for being able to reach people in a way that I could really not do in any other format. I mean, YouTube's just it's a great platform. I'm glad we live in the age we do, because this has added a new level of purpose to my life. And when you can reach out and call people your friends, and people tell you you've made a difference, it means something. It really means something. So that's me in a nutshell. Not sure there's a whole lot more that I could tell you, other than the fact that I'm 51 years old. I grew up as the son of a preacher, and I've lived all over, like Texas, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, and I've been here, like I said, in Florida since 1986. So getting up there. I'm getting a few more gray hairs, probably even as we talk.
Well, thanks for introducing yourself to the audience. That's great. We are 10
Absolutely.
years apart. We're a decade apart. So I want the audience to notice a difference between the generations. A generation, usually, I look at a generation as some people say a generation would be a decade. I would say when you're able to have like your first, literally actually able to bear children, So when I say like a generation should be not quite 20 years, 18, 19 years. So we're not
Right.
quite a generation apart. We're a decade apart. And your perspective and your view on life is why I follow you. Obviously, I get people that say to me, I came for the beard and stayed for the wisdom. And I initially knew of you because of the beard and stayed for the wisdom. So I
Oh,
am
nice.
one of those fans of yours as well. And when you started
Thank you.
sharing your wisdom on YouTube, I thought, especially in in the beard community, which I think is it's a weird term, because it just, like, whenever I hear like the whatever community, I just picture someone driving on the street and slowing down, and while I'm walking, and they roll down their window and they say, "Excuse me, can you tell me where the beard community is?" Yeah, if you go up about a mile, make a left, and then your second right, you'll find the beard community. So I always thought it was kind of
Right.
odd to call these groups beard communities, the pipe community, the beard community, the men's community, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. You're part of the beard community, and
Right.
we can't really get into reading without talking about your beard. So, how long have you had your beard?
I think I started growing it in, well, I think I was 43 when I started growing it out. I mean, that's the first time I ever had a beard. When I was a teenager, of course, I wanted to grow a mustache. Every teenage boy wants to grow a mustache, right? And so I did that. I had that for a few years. And then I went to a goatee many years later. Had that for a long time. Those have kind of fallen out of fashion.
Yeah,
But
I had
I thought about
I
going
think
back to it for a while.
I think
Huh?
every bearded guy went through a goatee stage. Everyone
Right.
did, right?
Right. And honestly, George, I never thought about never even crossed my mind to grow a beard, even when I had a goatee. And then I I don't know if it was my oldest brother or if it was watching you, and I don't even remember how I came across your videos, but I know my oldest brother was an influence also. My oldest brother has this magnificent beard, big beard, kind of like, it reminds me of yours when your beard was bigger.
Yeah.
And him and I look very similar. We have very similar features. And I thought, I wonder what I would look like with a beard. I don't know it exactly. I can't remember exactly what catapulted me into bearddom. And but that was about 43, late 43, about 44 years old. And I've had big, short, all sorts of different size beards, and I can never settle on one size because I like changing it up, like changing my look, because how boring would that be to have it the same length all the time, right?
Yeah, right. Right.
Right. You get it. You
I
get it.
do.
Yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
let me ask you this. Now, do you shave your head or buzz your head? I've seen you with an electric shaver. I've seen you with a blade. And when did you start doing it? And why did you start buzzing and shaving your head? It looks great, by the
Well,
way.
thank you. Thank you. I do shave my head. I just recently started using an electric shaver. As you probably saw my Bald Buddy video. Um,
Yeah.
and I've tried using electric shavers on and off over the years, and they always irritate my skin. So just recently I started using the Bald Buddy, and I like it a lot, and I'll probably use it more like during the week when I'm in a hurry to get out the door. But today I actually used a razor, and so you're always going to get a closer shave. When I first
Mhm.
started doing it, all I remember, I don't remember the year. I remember my oldest daughter was probably 3 or 4 years old. So that would probably make it about 2003, 2004. And I can tell you, a little, maybe a little bit closer. Um, when the movie The Mummy with Arnold Vosloo was popular, do you remember what I'm talking about?
I sure
Okay.
do. Absolutely.
My wife was, she just thought he was the hottest thing in the planet,
Yeah.
besides me. So,
Of course.
no,
Of
but she
course.
could, right. No, but she just thought he was it, and she thought that I would look good with a shaved head. She thought I should try. I'm like, I'm too vain. I'm too vain. I was wearing a flat top at the time. It was, you know, early 2000s. It still wasn't unpopular to have a flat top,
Mhm.
but I hated getting my hair cut. It was very rare to get a good haircut. And I said, I don't know. I said what a lot of guys said. If I shave my head's gonna look weird. I thought, well, why not? Why not do it? And I think it must have been about 2003, 2004, and I went to a barber, had him buzz it down. Didn't realize I could have done it myself. And then my head was very pale in comparison to my face,
Yeah.
because my skin is typically like olive colored because I live in
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah.
And so I went to work the next day, and guys laughed at me, and I laughed with them because they couldn't help it. I laughed with them, and but it tanned up really quick. But I've
Yeah.
been doing it ever since. Now I have tried to grow my hair out again one time, because well, it's kind of like having a beard. You grow your beard out and go, I can't remember what my face looked like, and you start thinking, I wonder what I looked like with hair, because I don't remember. I didn't take a lot of pictures back then. It was before the age of smartphones and camera
Yeah.
phones and all that. And so I grew my hair back out, and I was like, I'd never do that again. I didn't like it. It made me look dirty. And I remember before I grew a beard out, I just had a clean shaven face, and I tried growing a mustache out. I looked like an outlaw in an old Western movie or something. So,
That's great.
but I tell you, having a shaved head is great, man. Never having to worry about a bad haircut. Um, and I'll tell you what, women love it. Women love a shaved head.
Yeah.
My wife, she's always liked to shave it. She's told me before, and I've said on different occasions, I've told her, I said, I'm thinking about growing my hair back out just out of curiosity. Just don't do it. Do not do it. And I haven't. I just can't. I'll let
Yeah.
it. I'll go for about a week without shaving.
Hmm.
Shaving my head. But that's about it.
And you have it's like a dark shadow almost, that's what it looks
Yeah.
like. Your hair. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see where the hair would be.
Hmm.
But even when you have stubble on the head, it still looks great as far as general consensus is concerned. But
Yeah.
I tell people, you can thank Jason Statham for that. He made that
I,
very,
I was
very
just going to
popular.
say that. Yeah. That's like it's not quite a one guard. It's even lower than that. It's
Right.
like using the clippers on the lowest setting where it just leaves just enough stubble. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And you know what? You could honestly, for guys who are thinking about shaving their head, they could do that all the time and just fine. You'd never have to put a razor to your head if you didn't want to. I personally like using a razor because I like what it does for the skin.
Yeah.
The way it peels back. Because when I had a flat top, I couldn't wash my hair very often because if I did, the hair wouldn't stand the way it should.
Right.
Right? I mean, you have to use a lot of products anyway. But
Yeah.
my skin on my scalp would start to get real flaky, and I would be itchy.
Yep.
And but shaving my head, it gets rid of dead skin. It just makes the skin feel very healthy. And
Yeah.
but yeah, you wouldn't have to do that, you know.
Yeah.
I personally prefer a really close shave, or like I have that recently, this bald, but that's about the closest I've ever come with an electric shaver. But yeah, those are good looks. Women like it.
Yep.
In fact, on that bald buddy video that I just uploaded the other day, I linked a video at the end of that by a very attractive young woman named Courtney Ryan. She's got a great channel. You might like her. Her video is about 3 reasons why being bald is attractive, or something like that. She did a great job on that video.
That's
She
great.
might be somebody you might be interested in talking to.
I'll check her out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny in the YouTube community. Here we go with the community again. The community of content creators. We bump into each other. We respect each other.
Right.
Some don't, but that's their problem. I like to look at it as we're all in the same. We're all in the same business, so to speak. So.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, we know how hard it is to. I mean, it's an investment. When you're a content creator, you're always thinking about what you're going to be doing next, and it's
Always.
a labor of love. It's a
That's
labor
right.
of love. Unless you just in it for the money, you're doing it because you're trying to communicate the essence of yourself, and
Absolutely.
so you respect that in other individuals.
Yeah, because you know how hard it is to come up with content, and I tell people all the time, like if I'm coaching someone who wants to be a YouTuber or do some type of videos, like a video series, I say you have to be reading. You have to be, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight is reading. It's like, I call it like loading the pipeline. Like you got to load the pipeline. When there's enough data in there, it starts to come out, and it'll come out your mouth, so to speak. So I notice that the most interesting YouTubers are people that read.
Right. I would agree with that. What do people talk about? Other than what is currently trending, what do people talk about? If they're not reading, I find out that people who don't read a lot of times can't communicate themselves very well, and they use the same words over and over again. And I wouldn't imply they're stupid or not, but
right.
There's a very shallow well there a lot of times, and I think it's just a great reading is just a great habit, and I mean habit, to have, because when you develop it as something that you do every single day, you'd be surprised. Like you said, it has to come out. That's why I like doing YouTube. It has to come out, it has to go somewhere. And a lot of times I don't get to talk to people, so I talk to you guys and share what's on my heart. And growing up in a home where my parents were big readers, especially my dad, and him and I talked all the time about the stuff that we read. And he's been gone now for quite some time. So yeah, it's just, this is just a great outlet for that.
It is. There are some great quotes about reading and about books that I love. One is a room without books is like a body without a soul. So when I see books in a room somewhere, it just does something. When I see a stack of books behind somebody, bookshelves, when I go to someone's house and they have a wall of books, I feel more at home.
Right.
There's also an African proverb that I love that says, when an old man dies, a library burns to the ground. I love that.
Good.
I
is
love
really
that.
Good.
That's
because
why
it's
we don't
to talk to people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Data doesn't go away. Whatever, remember back in the 70s, the beginning of the digital age, people used to say garbage in, garbage out. And I think that reading is intentionally putting something good in your head versus just being a consumer. Because reading helps you be a creator, a producer, rather than just a consumer of digital data, whether it be the news or, I grew up and there was 3 TV stations, and PBS, and that was it. And there was the news at 6 o'clock. Yeah. And most TV stations would sign off at midnight. And then there would be that, I forget what they call that. There's that little symbol that just goes on the screen with a tone. And it would be that until morning, until like the sunrise. And then, and they were called, I think they were called, even with radio stations, they're called sunrise stations in the,
really?
in the media world. Yeah. There's some that just have like a daytime license. And I don't know if that still exists, but that when I grew up, there was radio stations that only were on the air during the daytime. And they were licensed by the FCC to only broadcast during the day.
Wow. Do you remember when they used to do that sign off and they would ask, do you know where your children are?
Yes.
Right. That was probably early 70s, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I remember that. I don't remember it for a long time, but I do remember it being on there. Do you know where your children are? And I tell it to my kids now. They're like, "What?" Yeah, it's true. It's really true. Yeah, I read. Here's a quote for you that I was looking up before I came on with you,
Hmm.
and this is by John Green, the man who wrote *The Fault in Our Stars*, which I have not read. But he said, sometimes you read a book and it fills you with this weird evangelical zeal, and you become convinced that the shattered world will never be put back together unless and until all living humans read the book. And I think that's why reading's fun. It goes back to what we said before. You have to tell somebody about it.
Yeah.
What are some of the books that what is a book or some of the books that you have read that relates to where you thought to yourself, I think everybody needs to read this. If everybody read this, it would take care of a lot of issues. What are some of the books that you read that you would say that's like?
That's a really good question. You know, when I was growing up, I read a lot of fiction,
Mm-hmm.
and then I grew out of it for some reason and started reading a lot of nonfiction, and that was probably because of college and such. And then I just rediscovered fiction again when I was about 40 and started reading stories and fiction. And I liked a lot of self-help, history.
Yes.
I I have a pretty huge library myself. I have a whole wall, floor to ceiling, of books. And
Mm-hmm.
literally, I have my shelves categorized: history, World War II, Civil War, psychology, philosophy, and just
Right.
all kinds of categories. And most recently, I'd say in the past 5 years, some of the most significant books that I've read are 100 years old or more.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree with
People,
that.
people like Christopher Morley, which is one of my favorite writers, and he writes a lot where he has a lot of pipes and pipe smoking, just like little things where a character pulls out a pipe and lights it and takes a puff and then responds to a question or something like that. So he has a lot of pipe smoking characters. So I like Christopher Morley in the sense that it brings me back to life over 100 years ago at the turn of the century, not this past century, but the one before it. And in the past couple
Mm-hmm.
years, I've gotten into 19th century science fiction, like H.G.
Okay.
Wells and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that has really moved me because it shows, it lets me know that there was significant life. You know, we say, is there life on Mars? That there was significant life 100 years before me.
Right.
People weren't behind. It was just a different world. And I love literally transporting myself. When I read a book
Right.
that's 100 or more years old, I go back in time. So for me, I time travel, so to speak, when I read, not just
Yes.
inform myself. So for me, reading people like Christopher Morley literally, literally takes me back. And it makes reading so enjoyable for me. And I don't want to put the book down. That's, you know, a phrase people say, oh, I couldn't put the book down. That's how Christopher Morley is. I can't put the book down. How about
Right.
you?
Now, I've not read any of Christopher Morley, but you have made me want to because you talked about him quite a bit, and I read quite a few quotations books, and he's quoted quite often.
Yeah.
So I'm sure his content is very rich.
Yeah. Now, you
Um,
recently were talking about books that you're reading right now, and
right.
you are reading a book called Chopin's Piano.
Yes. Yes.
And I became a huge fan of Chopin only after I met Agnieszka in Poland, uh, who's, yeah, there we go, Chopin's Piano. And
Yep.
when you get off the plane in Warsaw, Poland, which is Chopin International Airport, you
Okay.
you get off the plane, you walk through the thing, and when you come into the airport, there's Chopin playing. And the first
Oh,
thing I
really?
wondered, yes, 24/7. And what's interesting is I literally thought the airport was closed because it was so quiet, because I'm used to Philadelphia, which is a crap show. It's a zoo, and it's just noisy. It's a noisy airport, in
Yes.
addition to being a crappy airport. But it was so peaceful in Warsaw, Poland. And and of course, a lot of people think Chopin was French. He's
Right.
Polish. And
Right.
I remember Agnieszka taking me around the old city of Warsaw, and there's churches and cathedrals, free Chopin concert every day at noon. And I'm like, what is this
Really?
Chopin stuff everywhere? Yes. She took me
Wow.
to she took me to the church where Chopin's heart is. He
I
died
read
in
about that.
France. He died in France, and he said, when I die, remove my heart and bring it to my home, to my homeland. So I went to the church, and in the basement, the catacombs of this church, which wasn't destroyed in World War II. Of course, the Nazis just pretty much flattened all the major cities in
Hmm.
Poland. And what survived was the catacombs and the libraries and the relics and all these things that were below, ground level. So his heart is in this church. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And then I just
Right.
started listening to him. And then I started following, well, of course, the Chopin Festival. It is held every year in Warsaw, which is some of the greatest pianists in the world that come and compete.
Sure.
And I got turned on to a guy who is kind of like the uh, almost, I don't know what the word would be. I don't want to say I say reincarnation as a
I know what you mean. Yeah.
you know what I mean, not literal reincarnation, but he is kind of like the embodiment, and his name is Christian Zimmermann, and he is just phenomenal. I can listen to him just
Yeah.
all day long. So I've been turned on
Right.
to him for the past few years in his music, and I can't get enough of it. Can't get enough of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell me tell me about
This.
Chopin's piano.
So I had seen this on a recommended list that came across my way. I was in a bookstore in Winter Park or Winter Garden, Florida. Here, we went to go see my daughter, and I saw this. I said, "Well, it must be a sign. I've got to pick it up." I like classical music anyway. But the subtext of this here is in search of the instrument that transformed music. So this really is not a biography about Chopin. This is more about the piano, his first piano that he had, that he toured with. I think you pronounce it his Bauza piano. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's Bauza. It was made by a man in Spain, I believed. I believe, and him and his lover George Sand. She's a woman. She was very androgynous, apparently, and
Hmm.
apparently quite promiscuous too. And so they were renting out some space in a monastery up in Spain, I think it was. And then he was very, very sick. It was believed he had tuberculosis.
Yeah.
But then he had, in the course of time, over the course of time, he had died, and his piano had moved around. World War II came. The Nazis absconded with all these musical instruments from all these different places, and they were lost for a time. And so this is about tracing down where Chopin's piano went. And I'm almost finished with the book, and they still don't really know exactly where it went. But they take you through a lineage of people who had acquired his piano and then had it pretty much stolen from them by the Nazis. and then it ended up in the salt mines somewhere, and then from there it went. It just, these things went all over the place, and so this has been a labor of love. I'm going to use that term again, a labor of love for different people around the world who love Chopin's music to find his piano, and they haven't been able to do it yet. And I'm thinking, man, can you imagine being able to sit down at the very piano that Chopin's fingers glided across? I just can't.
Yeah.
I can't fathom that. I mean, that have you ever picked up an object and felt like you could tell where it was at before? Or, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how I feel like just doing that would transport you to a different place in time. And it makes me wonder, because I play the piano, it makes me wonder if I would play differently. And I don't play Chopin. I don't play any classical music. But, I mean, just makes you wonder, like, how that would affect you on whatever level. But it's a great book. I'll tell you, it's not for everybody. If you are not interested in music or composers, it wouldn't necessarily be for you. But if you love music and if you love history, it would definitely be a good one to pick up. I would say, if out of 5 stars, I would give it maybe 4. Only because, and it's just me, only because I have this thing about not being able to pronounce the names from another country, like especially Russian ones, Russian names, Polish names, and I get caught up, I get hung up on them. And but I'll tell you what it's done for me is I've always listened to classical music, but they actually pinpoint a lot of the specific pieces that he wrote and what he played them on, who he performed them in front of. It's made me go back to YouTube and look up these pieces being played by other individuals, like you were saying, Zimmerman and whatnot, and just listen to them over again. And when you hear the stories behind why they were written and what he was thinking at the time, it just makes you listen in a completely different way. So it's a good book. It's a good book for me. I wouldn't say it's for everybody, but you would probably like it.
I think I would. I'm probably going to order it tonight when we get off of this broadcast. I'll probably add it to my already long reading list.
Yeah, you have like 7 books at a time. Don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And I don't get another 7 when I finish the 7. When I finish one, I add another one. So there's always about 7 books going at all times.
That's what I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that you talk about feeling something when you have an inanimate object in your hand, and it's not inanimate. Let me find this thing here if I can. I have a pipe, a Dunhill pipe that was made in 1904. So before, and I looked up the serial number, and I can trace it right back to 1904. And so what I do when I take a puff on this, I think about the people that might have, this pipe, literally, a man might have celebrated a child's birth with this. He might have grieved a parent's death or a wife's death. He might have had it in his pocket while he was in the trenches in World War I. So I get transported with older objects.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of older objects, one of my pipe tampers is an organ stop. It's 150 years old with real ivory, and the German word Principal 8, which of course is the pipe that rattles your bones in a church service at the end of a hymn. And Bach knew this, where that it would shake and rattle the stained glass windows in a church. So I use this. This is a pipe tamper that I use. I recognized it right away. It's from a 150-year-old German pipe organ. So I always thought that was kind of interesting, and I think about the hymns that were played on this, and the souls that were comforted as a result of that. But boy, that sounds like a good book. That sounds like a good book. I'm definitely going to order that. What made you pick that up, Greg?
Well, like I said, I saw I saw it somewhere on some. I have an app called Goodreads. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not.
Yeah.
Actually, if you get the Goodreads app, you can kind of link. We can link to each other, and we can see who's reading what and whatnot. And I think I'm linked to one other person on Goodreads. But
Nice.
they also give you a recommended list of books that you might want to read because you've read other books like this. And I think it might have popped up on there. But when I was down there in Orlando or Winter Garden, wherever I was at, it was just a tiny little independent bookstore. And I saw it sitting on the shelf, and I have thought that a good idea would be to read a biography on all the classical composers of renown. And I've only done that with one. I read a real thick biography on Tchaikovsky, and that was a trip, man. That was something else. Very odd individual, extremely talented.
Yeah.
So when I saw this one on Chopin, I said, well, you know what? I'll add that to my collection and read this. But it's not really a biography per se. It's more of a hunt or a relic. And so
Interesting.
it's grabbed my attention. I like it a lot. I don't read. I maybe read about a chapter a day out of this.
Yeah.
Because you have to think a lot when you're reading it.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think you'll like it, George. I really do. You have to let me know
There,
what you think.
I will. I will. I'll probably do a review on it. I know when I started reading Christopher Morley, I usually have my phone alongside me, or actually a bound paper dictionary. And when I see words that I don't know, especially from, over 100 years ago, when language was different, I believe
Right?
it was I believe it was richer than a lot of the language that we use today. So I find myself, like when I read nonfiction, self-help things and this kind of stuff, I find myself flying through 25, 30
Yes.
pages an hour. When I read a history book, boy, I read it slow. When I read an
Yes.
older book, 100 years or more,
Right.
I have to stop and look up words, which slows down the
Right.
reading, of course, but it makes it,
But
I
I
think,
like
so
that.
much more enjoyable.
Yeah, I like that. I don't. I actually don't like reading a book where I don't have to look up anything. I find it less challenging, and I think to myself, well, I could have done that. I want
Yeah,
to read something that I can't do. I want I want something above my pay. You know,
yeah.
I'll tell you, you're absolutely right. Like I like a lot of the English writers of the night of the 19th and early, pretty much any of the 19th century, but early 20th century. And
Hmm.
you might have seen my video on the kingship of self-control. And I
Hmm.
read a chapter from William George Jordan's book of the same name. And he's not English, but the vocabulary of these people back then and the thought process, the way they structured their sentences, the way they spoke was incredible. And I'll tell you what, going back even further than that, if you go to St. Augustine, Florida, there's a pirate museum there you should go visit. And it's one of the best things in St. Augustine to see. And you go in there and they have actual log books from pirate ships from back in the 1700s,
Wow.
maybe further back than that. And you can see where they've scrawled documentation on their cargo. They have their names, dates, and whatnot. And these people could write so incredibly well. And that told me that no, if you can write that way, you can probably read at a very high level.
Yes.
And I was just so thoroughly impressed. In fact, when you were making your videos on writing and the pens and whatnot, it made me think of this. Um, but there, going back that far, people used, it wasn't a different language, but they leveraged their language to suit their ability to communicate. And I find myself using bigger words, not to be pretentious, but I find myself using bigger words when I read these books, because I find that these words they use strike directly to the heart of what I'm trying to say, rather than hunting around and then just settling on the same word I've used all the time. I don't know. I don't know if I'm speaking clearly here, but
Actually,
you
that
know what I
leads
mean.
me to that leads me to ask you this question, and it's kind of funny because you just basically answered it. Does
Yeah.
reading help you speak better? And you basically just testified to the fact that the more you read, the more options that you have to choose from when
Right.
describing something.
Yes, I do believe it does, because and this is why I'm an advocate of slow reading. I am not a speed reader. I do know how to speed read, but I'm not an advocate of speed reading. I highly encourage slow reading, because I think it's important to, some people say don't dialogue in your head, don't read it aloud in your head. I do, because I actually, a lot of times I hear my own voice reading back to me, and I do that on purpose so that I can experience myself actually using these words in this line of thought. um, and it does help with communication. I find that the way I talk now versus the way I talked 10, 20 years ago is vastly different. um, and it'll help you get out of jury duty. I was called up for jury. I was summoned for jury duty, and I have nothing against jury duty. I don't mind serving. Sometimes it's more inconvenient than it is at other times.
Yes.
And this last Monday, I was summoned. I even got in the jury box. The attorneys are questioning you, asking
Yeah.
you questions, and I was not using big words like they were asking about chiropractic work, and I was describing to them. I use the phrase, there's a plethora of accusations and experiences out there that that lend themselves to a lack of credibility in this field. Not that all of them are like this, but there's a great degree of them. And I had said something else similar to that. Now these are not big words. You and
Right.
I know these are not big words, but to them, they're like, you can see this little light go off.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't think it should be that way. But when I stopped talking, he goes, "Well, obviously, Mr. Boswell can articulate himself well." And then I noticed the whole tone after that, their whole tone toward me changed, and they didn't pick me for the jury. And so you're perceived differently when you can articulate yourself well, when you are very selective with your words. And I do think that's important. I think it's a lost form of communication. We live in a very not only quick communicative world, but it's also lazy at the same time. People just want to be stimulated quickly, and they don't want to have to think about anything. And so I personally, I get tired of hearing people use the same words over and over again. But I found that if you've got to be careful who you talk to and in what way you talk, because if you use a word that has more than 5 letters in it, with people, they'll turn you off. They will
Yeah.
turn you off a lot of times. You know what I mean?
You're right.
So, but this kind of goes back to, I'm curious as to whether you've read this or not, George. I'm also reading A Brave New World, written, I
Aldous
guess his name
Huxley.
is Aldous Huxley.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yes.
You read it?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Look, this is
I'm
another
all
one
about.
that's popped up on my recommended. Huh?
I love anything about kind of like dystopian futures and this kind of stuff. And they almost
Yeah.
George Orwell, Aldous Huxley. Uh, I just feel like they almost are kind of like prophetic. It's weird.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth. Yep. I just picked this book up for the first time the other day. I started reading it, and I told my boys, I said, this book creeps me out, because I used the word prophetic. I said this book is actually prophetic. This is about wokeology. I mean, it's just like the world we live in today. They
Yeah.
don't, this is a world in which they don't want you thinking for yourself. They don't want you making decisions. They want everybody to feel good all the time. But at the same time, they don't want you feeling too many emotions.
Right.
They don't want you reading too many books, and everything's very controlled. And when I'm reading this, and what I found interesting was that they introduced the way they secure social stability is they introduce sexuality to children at a very young age.
Wow.
And I thought that was disturbing.
What is the copyright date in that? Do you know when was that written? I should know
1931.
that.
1931.
Isn't that something? Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that
and I'm
something?
thinking that's how it is now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sexuality is shoved down our children's throats now. And it's a gateway to basically brainwashing, you know, the future generation. So, or the up and coming one. But I tell you, I can't hardly put this thing down. I can't hardly put it down. It's really
amazing.
Grabbed me by the throat.
It makes me want to now get a biography of Huxley and Orwell.
Right.
I want to just see. I want to read about their lives and what was in their brain. You know, how can these stories come out of their heads? You know what I mean? And
right.
What I'm interested in, I'll tell you, I wonder, like, I know there's a lot of authors. I'm so analog. I just wrote a book, and someone said, well, send me a copy and I'll help you proofread it. And I said, well, it's not on a Word program. I actually wrote it. I literally wrote it with a pen.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if these authors wrote their stories with a pen or on a typewriter. That's what I'm wondering. I mean, people like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, you know, they literally wrote with pen and ink. It's kind of interesting, and then transcribed after that. So I would love to find that out.
Well, I know that Aldous Huxley, I think from what I read, I had to look up something about this book that we were just talking about here, and I think he wrote Brave New World as a parody to 1984. But it's so accurate that it's uncanny. Now, going back to what you said about writing things out literally, analog, like you're talking about. My favorite literature, my favorite literary author is W. Somerset Maugham, and his writings move me like nobody else's, more than Dickens. And the last book I read, I bought this on the same day I bought Chopin's piano. It's called Cakes and Ale, and his books are written from like a first person, it's like a narrative, first person narrative, and you get the feeling that it's not really fiction. It's really him. It's really about his life.
Right.
But I read a biography on him, and he did write out everything just like you're talking about. He'd sit at his desk and write for hours on end, pen and paper. And I find that probably a little more thought provoking. Who's the guy who wrote? I think it's the guy who wrote Fight Club. Chuck. How do you say his last name? Palahniuk or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's either him or Dave Sedaris or somebody like that, a contemporary writer. They say they write their books out on typewriter so that they are less prone to correct themselves. So what you see is what you get. But I don't think I have the writers correct on that. But there's somebody that I read about recently that when they write, that's what they do. Is they write on typewriter so they don't go back and correct, and you get the first draft. Which I don't know if that's a real smart move, to be honest with you. I think first drafts are probably, most of them could probably be tossed in one way or another. I don't know. I'm not a writer, but
I heard that Lord of the Rings, there was 70,000 pages written. 70,000. Literally, if you stacked up all the paper that Tolkien wrote on, it literally was from the floor to the ceiling. and that he
Wow.
just constantly revised, constantly over and over and over.
Right.
And he didn't set deadlines. He didn't say, okay, I got to finish this chapter, I got to finish this concept in the book. He just kept writing and writing and writing. And that's why a lot of people can't read Tolkien, because he just goes on and on and on. And of course, in his mind, think about what was in his mind, to be able to create a language, like a separate language, that blew me away. I heard a great story, Greg, about Tolkien. He was, of course, he and C.S. Lewis were professors at Oxford, and it was a hot, sweaty night. Literally, the windows were open in his office. He's sitting at his desk, literally grading student papers. And then he just took a piece of scrap paper. And he had this thing in his head, and he wrote this down. And he wrote down, "In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit." And then he pushed the paper to the side. And that was the beginning of that whole series. It started out, and he had to put it on paper. And that was the beginning. Can you imagine what that piece of paper is worth if that still exists somewhere?
That's a thought. That's something worth pondering right there. Oh man. I would love to find out.
Yeah.
I would love to find out.
Pretty interesting, right?
So yeah, exactly. This book that you're writing, when is it going to be out?
I'm probably going to turn it into a course and not literally a book. It'll be a course first, and then it's going to literally, I'm going to print it out. And I'm really big into publishing. I love publishing. And I will say this, though, with the advent of cancel culture, I mean, when you think about like Fahrenheit 451, all right?
Right.
Think about when books and concepts and ideas start getting, like, we're already getting banned. We're getting, people who think differently than the masses are getting canceled on the internet, and their work is disappearing. So what's going to be left is a literal physical book. Okay. I really believe that our writing, we should start literally publishing on paper. We should start publishing on paper our writing, rather than just typing away on the computer. So when we write something, if we write an anthology, I think it would make sense to literally publish a paper and ink version of it. If it's a collection of short stories, paper and ink. I like holding a book in my hand. I want to feel it. I want to smell it. The tactile nature of a book versus reading. Like when I download ebooks, I will literally take a flash drive, transfer that file onto the flash drive, and then I will go to like Staples and print it out, rather than read it on my laptop or read it on my phone or a Kindle. I literally like holding it in my hand.
Yes, I do too. I am not a Kindle or any kind of notebook reader. I like actually holding the book, smelling it, seeing where I'm at, marking it. Which brings me to another question, George. When you read, what are some of your habits in reading? Like, what do you do to be a better reader while you're reading? I don't know. I hope, if I didn't frame that right, let me know.
Yeah, I have and I've talked about this in the past, where I have a 4-color pen, and I've been using these things for years. And I take notes and underline and highlight and put stars next to things in different colors. And I prioritize because I never read a book just once. I forget who's, C.S. Lewis said, you need to read the classics every 10 years. I like the idea of going back, because when you read a book the second time, it's like reading a different book. It's like, wow, I missed that. I missed that the first time around. but I like to take notes and underline and highlight, put stars and concepts and phrases in the columns and at the top of the page. When I get done
Yes.
reading a book, I butcher that book. I literally,
Yes.
literally, the pages are practically falling out. Before I actually, when I get a book, the first thing I do is I watch this, watch this. I mean, that just falls right over because
Right.
I opened it up and I crease it and I go through the book one page at a time. So I'm not going to be breaking the binding. So all my books I break in physically before I read them. So I can turn the pages easily. So I'm not going to destroy the book because I know I'm going to be reading it more than a few times. How about
I
you?
remember when you made a video about that. Yeah, I remember when you made a video about that. I had never seen anybody do that, and I started implementing that. I don't do it all the time now because I've kind of forgotten about it, but I remember I started doing it like right after I saw that video. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
especially now, since a lot of bindings are glued and not sewn anymore, like this book here is literally, it's a glued binding. And, if you don't break in the book that way, then what happens is the pages stand more of it, they're more susceptible to falling out. And
Right.
literally, uh, you're breaking the binding. So I have, like, for instance, I could have gotten, like, the Christopher Morley books that I have. I could have gotten paperback versions of them with glued bindings, but I made sure that I got hardcover copies of the book because everything now is glued. You don't see sewn bindings as much anymore. And book binding is an art, which is, I'm just fascinated by book binding. And
Yes. Yeah.
I love books that are literally chronologically old, as well as
Right.
the information in new books, that are printed
Right.
and glued and so forth. But I prefer I prefer a sewn binding over a glued binding when it comes to the classics, because I don't think, not every book is published hardcover anymore. I don't know if, like, Chopin's Piano has a hardcover version, or is it?
I don't know.
Or, yeah, it's
I
that
kind of doubt it. I kind of doubt
right.
it. But I prefer hardback books myself, and I know what you're talking about. The sewn. They do. There is a difference, definitely a difference in the way they hold up over time.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I'll tell you what. You were talking about marking up your book. I read, I think, 5 or 6 different biographies on President John Adams, and he was that kind of a reader also. He was known for marking up and butchering his books quite a bit, and you couldn't turn the pages without some kind of notation in them. And he wasn't afraid to pick up books and pick up and read books that he disagreed with too, and he'd give his arguments in the margins and so on and so forth. And that was an influence for me to do the same thing. I'll also keep a highlighter. I don't use a pen as much because I find that I don't make very good straight lines to underline, and I don't like messing it up that much. So I'll use a yellow highlighter, one that doesn't bleed through the pages, and then I'll also go to the front of the book where there's a lot of space, a lot of like a few blank pages, and I'll
Yeah,
write down where certain things are, so that even though I've highlighted them, I'll I can find them quickly, exactly what page is on when I go back to it, and that helps a lot too. And one of the ways I remember, I'm going to make videos on all this. You know, I keep saying this, but I'm going to make videos on this eventually. One of the ways I remember what I read is, of course, you can't remember everything, is I talk about them. I either talk about it on YouTube or I talk about it to my friends or my family, but I have to talk about it to somebody, and that cements everything in my mind, at least for a good
yeah,
long time.
yeah.
Especially if I can derive a meaning, a life application from a story, which is what a lot of my YouTube videos are about. If I can do
Hmm.
that, than I can remember them. So that's those are some good practices likewise. And I always like hearing what different people do.
Yeah.
It's valuable to me.
I'm
Tim
a
Ferriss.
fan. Oh yeah,
I'm
Tim
sorry, go
Ferriss.
ahead.
Yeah.
Well, he's got some interesting tips on reading likewise that are very similar to these things. And there's a good YouTuber for those of you who are watching. There's a young man on YouTube. His name is R.C. Walden. Waldun is a young man, like in his early 20s. And he's got a great channel all about reading, all about books, and all about writing that you really need to check out. He's fun to watch. I binge watch his videos.
That's another rabbit hole that I'm happy to fall down.
Yeah, he's good. I think you like him, George. He's a young guy, but his the way he thinks impresses me for a young man his age. I'm just amazed at how he thinks. I think he's
Yeah.
ahead of his time. But it takes
there's
reading to do that.
it does. It's funny when I go to pen shows, and that has been kind of a new addiction for me. I went to my first pen show at probably 57, 58 years old, and I bump into a lot of writers at pen shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just go from table to table, from vendor to vendor. When I go to a pen show, I go for the people. I want to get to know the people there. And I bump into so many writers. I can't believe there is a resurgence of fountain pens. Now, some people say, well, I've always been into fountain pens and dip pens and pen and ink and that kind of stuff. And some people say, well, it never really went away. Well, for me, the last time I wrote with a fountain pen, I was in elementary school. The last time I was dipping a pen in ink and writing, literally, it was maybe high school when I was doing calligraphy or something like that. And to think that, for instance, like when there's a book called The Inklings, and there's many, many books about C.S. Lewis and his contemporaries, and they would meet at a bar in Oxford, a pub called the Eagle and Child. And their contemporaries would make fun of this small group of men and jokingly called them the Inklings because they preferred writing with pen and ink. And they would go there after a day of teaching at Oxford and talk about their stories. Like a great, like talking about what you're writing, talking about what you're reading is so important. Like what you said, I remember hearing, reading that C.S. Lewis would say to Tolkien, "Oh my God, not another elf story." that kind of made me laugh.
Yeah.
But here was a group of grown men who wrote their stories on paper. Fascinating. And of course, that's a rabbit hole. Pens, inks, the papers used, that kind of thing.
Something I meant to say earlier, and I'm glad you talked about putting pen to paper again, because when you were talking about publishing actual books that are written in pen and ink, I think that would be fascinating because you'd learn so much more. Now, you wouldn't just get the story, you'd get the man or the woman themselves, because I love looking at how people write. I love trying to figure out somebody based on their penmanship. And it tells you a lot. Tells you a lot. My mother has the most amazing penmanship. And she's very deliberate, very particular, and she just writes so pretty. My older brother, one time he came down here from Minnesota, and he works in the beautification hair industry like you do. And he'd come down and visit us. He stayed overnight here, and he used my youngest son's room. And the next day, when he left, my kids had already gone to school before he was up. and my youngest son came home, and he had a note from my older brother on the countertop. And I go, "What's this?" He goes, "Oh, your brother left me a note." And I read it, and he was thanking my son for letting him use his room, and he wrote it out in pen. And I read it, and several thoughts went through my head. And that was, first of all, nobody writes anymore. Nobody writes anymore. And then I was like, God, he's got really nice penmanship. And on top of that, it was extremely thoughtful to take the time to put pen to paper to say thank you. In fact, I made a video on it a couple years ago. I think I did, maybe about a year and a half ago. I made a video about it, and it's one of my favorite videos. Is encouraging people to take the time to put pen to paper and say thank you for something. But I think that would be interesting to read a book written like that, because then you could, on top of getting the story, you'd be getting the person themselves as you look at how they write, and try to figure out what kind of personality they have, what drives them. And God forbid anybody should see my writing. I mean, I used to write I used to have pretty good penmanship, but I've noticed that anything I try to write lately has been compromised due to falling out of use. And I really need to get back into it.
Yeah. All right. So you're a husband, you're a father of 6. Are there any?
I'm a father of 4.
Father of 4.
Right.
Oh, a family of 6, a father of 4.
Right.
Right. Are there other readers in your family? Did that kind of get passed on?
My wife doesn't read a lot, but when she does, she'll pick up these mammoth-sized books, and she'll go through them in like a day.
Wow.
I don't know how. I don't know how she does it, but in fact, she was an inspiration for me to read more. I used to see her do that and go, "How in the world do you do that?" I'm like, I always liked the idea of reading. I used to love to go to bookstores when I was a kid. I always bought books. I'd get books at school and bring them home. I've always enjoyed the idea of reading, which is where a lot of our viewers might be right now as they're watching this. It might be why they're tuning in. But as far as my immediate family, as you just mentioned, I wouldn't say there's any big readers. I guess my oldest daughter is reading more now, the one that's went off. She's not living with us anymore, but I think she's reading more now than she used to, which is it's good to see that. But not really. I wouldn't say there's not really any big readers in our family right now. I'm hoping that changes, and I try to drop suggestions to my kids. I was telling my youngest son, yesterday, you need to read Brave New World to find out what kind of world you're living in right now and where it's going. Another book I've tried to get them. I'm gonna buy each one of my boys. I only have 2 boys, but I'm gonna buy both of them their very own copy of South: The Endurance Expedition by Ernest Shackleton, because that will show them. Have you read that?
No, but I'm familiar with his journaling.
Oh, and that's what his book is. It's a journal.
Yeah.
You love it, man. You love it. Anyway, that book changed my life, changed the way I look at adversity. When you read that book, you will literally shiver. I don't care how hot it is outside. You will feel so cold reading it because of the conditions in which he writes. He does such a good job of relaying his experience. But that was one of the most life transforming books I've ever read, and I'm going to buy my sons their own copy. I can only hope that they'll have the gumption to read it on their own once they, have the desire to do so, because I hope it does for them what it did for me.
Yeah. Reading, it's interesting. The joke about like Playboy magazines. People would, the joke used to be, well, I get Playboy for the articles, not for the pictures. And there actually used to be some very good writing, some good journalism in there, of course, sprinkled with, pictures of naked women, of course. And it was very fascinating. And I remember hearing that joke in the 70s. Well, I get it for the articles. I read Playboy for the articles. And I thought, okay, well, that's
Right.
interesting. It's funny. I haven't purchased a newspaper in years. Literally,
No, me neither.
probably over 10 years. And my neighbors recently went on vacation, and I get their mail and the newspaper from their driveway every day when, and I give it
Right.
to them when they return from a trip. And I got the Philadelphia Inquirer, which I stopped reading years ago, but now it looks like a pamphlet. I'm thinking, where is the journalism now? What is going on? I remember the daily newspaper, and there used to be a morning edition and an evening edition. Now it's like this thin newspaper. Literally, it reminds me of the free newspapers that you get at the train station or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
it's not a robust paper anymore. And I was telling someone that I think journalism is dead. I think journalism has pretty much died. And I love people that read and I love people that write, but where are they? Where are they?
I know.
So here we are. I was saying this to you after, like prior to us coming on the air live, that here we are. It's a Saturday night. It's about 8:30. We're geeking out about books and reading and so forth.
Right.
And while other people are watching Netflix and Amazon and channel surfing and so forth, or going out or whatever, there is a reader's personality and a writer's personality. Do you agree with that?
A reader's personality and a writer's personality?
Yeah. Do you believe that, like, for instance, like when you were like in the on jury duty, they saw something in you that was not like everyone else.
Right.
You weren't a typical news watching, pop culture following person. They're like, oh, this guy's got some depth.
Right.
We're in trouble.
Yeah. I you know what? I don't know if I could say that there's a personality that is bent toward that. I think it's very possible. It's very possible. I think that things can happen to people in their lives that will stop them full force in their tracks and make them say, "Whoa, I've got to rethink everything," and then drive them to find knowledge, to seek knowledge. At least I would hope. But even at that, I still don't think some people will really dive too deep. I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but I think to err on the side of caution, I would say probably there is personalities for that, and I think that they're the contemplative people. To go further than that, I think they're empathetic people who have the ability to feel for others. And I think that books can bring that out, especially fiction.
Yes.
Good literature, I hope, will develop empathetic individuals, because it'll actually place you in the footsteps and in the mind of the individual and tell you what things actually feel like instead of telling you just what somebody did.
Yes.
So I think that probably the greatest readers are probably the ones who are the most contemplative anyway.
Yeah.
And probably most empathetic. And it will be accentuated by the books. But I think that people can develop that. People who maybe aren't necessarily naturally bent, I think they can develop it to maybe even to a great degree. If they take on a good habit of reading, which is what I want to make some videos about. I want to teach people how they can read more, because I think it is a process. I think it's a big process. I don't think it, even for me, I'm still learning things about how to read better. And how, I'm not so much concerned about reading more. I'm concerned about making my reading experience count for everything that it's worth.
I like that. A quick little disclaimer here. I just mistakenly blocked my best childhood friend. He just said, "You guys are the best thing on," and I wanted to highlight it and put it on the screen, but I ended up hitting the wrong thing and deleting his comment. So TJ, if you're watching, I did that by accident, not on purpose. So, but TJ just said, "Yeah, you guys are the best thing on right now." And thank you, TJ. I appreciate that. And so I just wanted to make sure I'm not offending. TJ was my first friend. His mother cut hair, my mother cut hair, and we were born, a month apart, and we were literally infants in a playpen together when we were just babies. So we literally grew up together. He was actually my first friend, but I just actually deleted it. I just deleted his comment by accident. So sorry about that, TJ. Anyways.
Well, I guess he knows where you stand now.
Yeah. Mark Kearney says journalism has gone out the window. I do agree with that. Journalism is gone. I think everything has turned into wokeology. I like to say that I am awakened but not woke, and I think that literally shows in my writing, in my speaking. And let me ask you this: do you write? How is your writing? I mean, literally, do you write stories, poetry? Do you write letters?
No, but I get a fire under me every once in a while to write, and I always promise myself, I make a pact to myself, I'm going to write more. I'm going to journal every night. And the thing is, I actually write well. Okay, but my problem is I don't know when to stop writing. That's not a bad problem necessarily.
I was going to say,
I'll sit down at night and start writing, and I can't stop. I'm like, I gotta go to bed at some point. But I need to do more of that. And I'll tell you who's really a big inspiration to do that. And I've already mentioned him. Is that YouTuber RC Walden, because he talks about that all the time. And so every day I think about, reconstituting myself and getting back into that. But especially the older I get, I think it's more important to actually catalog my experiences in life and everything, because, I don't know, maybe no one will care. Maybe I could turn it into a book. But honestly, George, one of the things I've thought about doing, and a couple people recommended to me, is taking some of the YouTube content that I've created and turning that into a book. And that's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
As maybe like a devotional type thing.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'd be the first to buy it if you do. Definitely.
Well, thanks, George. I'll keep that in mind, because I've thought over the years about making devotionals. I used to teach in church, and I haven't done that. In fact, I haven't even been to church in a while. But I grew up in a pastor's home, and we were all, my mom and my dad always made, everything was about a lesson. Everything was a lesson, and they're great teachers, and so that's where I get a lot of it from, and that's why I try to turn my videos into. Unfortunately, they don't seem to be catching on as well as I'd like. I don't know why. I think that they would. I get very few dislikes per view, and so it just tells me they're not being seen a lot. I guess we can thank YouTube algorithms for that. But
100%. That's right.
I would love that to take off, and just for me to know that it's reaching a lot of people, because people tell me all the time these devotional type videos are helping me a lot, and you get those too. And that really touches my heart, and it just drives me, and so anyway, to take that material and turn it into a book could be a very real possibility in the future.
What's interesting is you told me a little earlier in our conversation that you were in a bookstore where you bought this Chopin's book. You actually
Mhm.
went to a bookstore. You walked into
Yeah.
a physical facility where there was shelves with books on it, as opposed to
Right.
just ordering something online. What drove you to go into a bookstore?
Oh, I love bookstores. In fact, it's very rare I ever order a book over the internet. I mean, it's so I can't remember the last time I mean, I have gotten books through the mail. It's been so long, can't hardly remember when it was. But I love bookstores, and I prefer going by myself because when I go for a long time. I'm in there for a very long time. Sometimes I'll walk out with nothing. Sometimes, and a lot of times the books I buy are on the bargain shelf. Well, $5. It has nothing to do with how good a book is. But I love
Right,
going in there. I love feeling the books. I love seeing the order. I love seeing the colors of the covers. I love the smell. Um, I like seeing what one bookstore has the other doesn't. And I'll even go to antique stores just for the purpose of looking for books. But that's how I actually prefer to do it. And I would love to be able to support a local bookstore rather than support Amazon. You
sure,
know, the people who are actually
sure.
trying to get these into people's hands. I think it's important to look after the small guy. And I don't mind paying a little bit more. Sometimes it's not even a little bit more.
Yeah,
There's something about that experience. It's very classic. And when you read a lot of the older books that you and I are talking about, coming from 100 years ago or more, a lot of these people, their characters in their books, if you'll notice, a lot of them frequent bookstores.
yeah,
So I get to participate in that experience when I do the same thing. It's another way of
yeah,
connecting with the characters in the books. And it's something I just absolutely relish.
yeah. It's funny that you say that because one of my favorite Christopher Morley books is called
Hmm.
The Haunted Bookshop. And it's
Oh,
literally, I probably have read it 5 or 6 times. It's such a joy to read. And it's about a guy that has a bookshop. And it's not literally haunted. As a matter of fact, the pipe that I have is filled with a pipe tobacco called Haunted Bookshop. And
oh, neat.
it's named after Christopher Morley's novel called
Uh,
The Haunted Bookshop. It's fascinating. But that book,
I love
the book that I have, The Haunted Bookshop, I got it on eBay, and it is a hardcover, a sewn binding, and it's an old library book from 1955. And a lot of times libraries will liquidate their old
that.
inventory, stuff that is either just not relevant or people haven't read. And in the back of this haunted bookshop that I have, this haunted bookshop book, is the library card and the pocket. And I pull
Oh,
the card
wow.
out and I can see the people that took the book out of the library. And I use that as my bookmark.
Oh, wow. I love that. See, that's what these books do is they connect you in so many ways. Um, Not just the interpersonal experiences that you share with characters in a book, but you get tangible things like that in a
Yeah.
book. And I have a couple of really old books, and I think I picked them up at an antique store. I don't remember where I got them, but they're the one is one is the it's just nothing but quotations from Elbert Hubbard. I don't know if you know who
Hmm.
that is.
Hmm.
And the other is one is quotations. The other is the philosophy of Elbert Hubbard. And as you open, and they're both hardback. As you open up the cover of the book, inside, this woman has scribed her name and the year she bought it, and the date she finished it. And it's like
Fascinating.
1930s or 1940s or something like that. I'm going, wow, whose shelves have these sat on? Like there's just a shared experience. There's something that you cannot replace electronically.
That's true. It's different than reading a Kindle. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think that I could adopt the idea of using a Kindle or just using audiobooks, but I don't think I could ever do it. I like diving in head first and not coming back up for air for a long time.
Do you remember the video that I did? Probably, I'm guessing it was about 2 years ago. I bought a dictionary from 1872, and it's
that must be nice.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about it is when you think about a book that was printed in 1872, it was typeset. It wasn't printed electronically. So that's fascinating. So the pictures and the sketches that are in it are absolutely fascinating, and the language is different. I mean, literally, it's definitions from another era. And I literally can spend an evening with this dictionary in my lap, turning the pages and looking up definitions. I do this sometimes when I want to make a video about how life used to be. For instance, when you look up the word marriage in a dictionary from 1872,
right,
the definition's a little bit different than a dictionary that was printed in 2021.
But that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny how words change over time. Here's a good practice, and I would encourage anybody who wants to be a good reader to do this. I haven't done it in a long time, but when I do pick up the practice, I'll carry it on for a year or so at a time. Get yourself a nice dictionary, not a big one, but like one that kids in school would use. I mean, not an elementary level, but just pick up like a pocket, not a pocket dictionary, but I don't know, just not a big one. And read one page a day out of your dictionary. Read it like a book. Identify whether it's a noun or a pronoun or adjective or whatever it is. Read it aloud. Understand exactly how it's pronounced. When I started doing that, and I don't think I got the idea from anybody. I think I just dreamed it up. I'm sure other people do it, but when I got the idea, I thought I was well read. And then I was surprised at how many words I didn't pronounce right and how many words I was defining incorrectly. But it opened up my world. It opened up my world. In fact, there have been a handful, maybe a couple handfuls of videos that I have made based upon what I have learned about a word from just reading in the dictionary. But I would read one page a day, like a book, and I would read it out loud. And I would identify what kind of word, where it came from, what it originally meant, and it just really opened up my eyes when I read. And that way, it's surprising to me. It's really surprising to me when I would pick up a normal book, whatever book I'm reading at the time, inevitably, whatever words I had read on that page that day showed up in my book. I don't know how that happens, but it shows up in the book, and then I don't have to go look it up because I've already read it.
Yeah,
but it's a great practice to have, and nobody ever talks about it. But read a dictionary like a book, but only like a page at a time because it's too heavy otherwise.
That's a great practice. I think it's. Literally, who is doing that today? Who is doing that? People are spending.
I don't know anybody who's doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You seem to like the analog life. Like I get up in the morning and I read right away. That's one of the first things that I do. I don't check my email. I start reading right away. And I read a book. I'm not reading on the web. I want to read something. And
Right.
There are times, certain times of the day that I like reading nonfiction. There's certain times of the day that I like reading fiction, because when I read fiction, I want to, like I said, I want to time travel a little bit. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
I find that people who are more analog, I find them to be interesting people. That's why I like going to pen shows, because I'm
Right.
with an analog crowd. Like
Right.
there are those, like for instance, I have a writing desk. It's a small desk. It's not like a executive desk. It's literally, my grandparents had a desk in their home that I grew up around. I remember seeing that thing. And I have like this little brass thing where you change the month and the date on
Oh
it, and
yeah.
you turn these, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's where they that's where they paid their bills, they wrote their letters, and you would never write on the actual desktop itself. You would put a blotter on there, and that was where you wrote your letters. So you didn't
Interesting.
have, yeah, so you didn't have the, literally, so you didn't have, if you're writing with a pen, you wouldn't mar the top, the finish of the desk. So do you
Right.
remember when people used to have blotters on a desk? Remember, it was like
No.
this kind of like a like this piece of thick paper in a frame, and the corners were like leather. They had, the corners were made of leather.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking
I
about?
think so. I think
Yeah,
so. Yes.
yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if
And
I
they
knew
were,
that's what they were,
yeah, that was
but
called
now that you say that,
yeah, a
yeah.
desk blotter. Yeah.
Yeah.
There there are times when if I go into like a like an antique store, or a like a thrift store, secondhand shop, and I see a desk, an old desk for sale, for $20 or something like that. I love it when I see ink in the wood.
Right.
It just kind of, it lets me know this is authentic. Maybe ink was
Right.
spilled on it. Maybe this, when this desk was manufactured, it was a day when they were dipping the pen in ink and then writing. I find that fascinating. That kind of takes me back. I time travel a little bit when I
Yes.
see
No,
things
I
like
get it.
that.
I get it. I totally understand that. It has character. It goes back to, I mean, I think a lot of it's my imagination, but it goes back to being able to touch an object and transport yourself to a different time and place and hear conversations. And I always wonder, am I right? Am I right about this? Or is just my imagination just running away with itself? Now, when I was growing up, my brothers used to tell me that's what my imagination I was doing, is letting my imagination run away with itself. But even if it is, I don't. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's kind of fun. So
Actually, it is. You're right.
yeah, I mean, it's not hurting anybody. As long as long as I don't let my imagination rule everything else, I guess I'm okay.
Are you
But
familiar
look at
with
this.
Vox? Are you familiar with Vox Day? Do you know who Vox Day is? You follow him at all? He's
No, tell me about him.
he's a content creator, uh, he's a forward thinker. He's a believer. He's kind of a non-conformist kind of guy, but he has a publishing house called Castalia House, and they just
Okay.
started publishing like leather-bound books. And these books are expensive, but literally bound books that have leather covers on them. He's
Okay.
not a print on demand kind of book. And you order
Okay.
his books. He's starting to put out, because he's the one that convinced me that when everybody gets canceled electronically, digitally, the only thing that's going to be left is the actual physical book. And that's why I'm thinking I'm going to literally start publishing rather than e-publishing. Literally
Right.
start publishing paper and ink books. But he started publishing leather-bound books, like classic books. Fascinating stuff.
How do you spell Day? D-E-Y or D-A-Y?
D-A-Y.
Is he on YouTube?
He was. I'm not sure if he still is. He might have gotten banned. I'm not sure. But it's VOXDAY. And he broadcasts every night from D Live, which is a video platform. Fascinating
I'll
guy.
look him up.
Brilliant guy. Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, now we both agree that we're going to read something tonight. And I will read first, and then we will end the show with your reading. And you're one of the only people I know that reads out loud like this. I've seen you do that, and I have done that. I started reading 19th century science fiction to my audience, and I love doing it. But I'm gonna pick a reading, and I'll read something, and then you read something, and then we'll tell everyone where they can find you. But let me just see. There's one thing I wanted to read, and this is from a. Let me find it here. From a guy by the name of Victor Pride. That's his pen name, and he wrote a series of books called Bold and Determined. And I thought it was interesting, and I thought it might be appropriate. It is nonfiction, and I'll just do a quick little reading, and then when I'm done, then you can do your reading. So this piece is called How to Succeed If You're Shy or Introverted. I was pretty much afraid of everything. Afraid of the world, afraid of speaking. Really, I was shy as a kid. Music was a way to speak. Can you guess who said that? A, anonymous shy kid on the internet, or B, lead singer of Metallica, the most popular heavy metal band of all time? The correct answer is B. James Hetfield, the lead singer of the multi-platinum selling band Metallica, was a cripplingly shy kid who grew into a shy adult who made millions singing to enormous crowds of people. Shy? But he sings in the most popular metal band of all time. How can that be? Easy answer. He's a performer, not a conversationalist. Performance is not the same as polite conversation with strangers. Performance isn't real, therefore easier, and at the same time, performance bears the artist's soul and is completely real, which fulfills the need for expression. Performance is more, it's bigger and grander. It's easier to do than talking to strangers if you're shy. Introverts like to live in a world that's their own. Performance allows artists to have their voice heard in a way that they want it to be heard. I could journal, just write poetry, or write whatever was in my head and sit down and strum a few chords and put that together. That's who I am. That's me telling the world about me when I can't do it on my own. And that was James Hetfield from Metallica. And then he says, what to do if you're shy? 5 steps to forget shyness. Number 1, don't feel sorry for yourself. Being shy isn't a curse or a burden, it's a benefit. 2, put on a performance. Simply act as if you aren't shy in situations that require you to be social. 3, follow 30 days of discipline. It'll make you get out of your head and force you to act, and that act becomes the real you. 4, learn a skill. Use your alone time to develop a skill and develop a central theme in your life. 5, have a mission. You can't succeed without a mission. Doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted. Have a goal, a purpose, a mission, and everything else is easy. More important than introversion or extroversion, to succeed wildly, you need to be smart. But how smart do you have to be? Well, you have to be a genius. But you don't need to be a genius in all areas of study. You don't have to be a book smart nerd. You only need to be a genius in one area to find success. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is a genius. He isn't book smart. He can't even read. He's a boxing genius. That boxing genius led him to great wealth. Floyd spent the time learning his skill boxing. Now he spends his time performing his skill. He used the patented shy guy training method, and he's not even shy. Frankly, if you do the work, you will succeed. Make no difference if you're introverted, extroverted, this or that, blah, blah, blah. You still have to do the work. This recipe works for anyone, whether you're shy or outgoing. The success recipe is still the same. Learn the skill and use the skill.
I like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can relate to what he's talking about. Tell me, were you shy when you were a kid?
Terribly.
So was I.
Introvert.
Yeah.
Painfully.
Me too. Yeah. And I'm still like that. A lot of people may not believe it, and they probably don't believe it with you either. But what we do a lot of times is a performance, although it's not really fake. It is genuine.
Yes.
But it's that genuine part of us that it's down deep inside. And he's absolutely right. I agree with all of his points there. I actually made a video on how I overcame shyness, although I would still say in some settings I'm still pretty shy, but that was rich. I like that. I like that a lot.
Excellent. What do you have for us tonight?
Well, I'm going to give you an excerpt from Chris Voss's book. Am I frozen here?
Nope.
Okay. Can you see me all right?
Yep.
Because on my screen I'm frozen.
Okay. You'll come back. I'm sure you'll come back.
Okay.
But we can hear you.
So this book is called this book is called Never Split the Difference: Negotiating as if your life depended on it. And Chris Voss was an FBI negotiator, and I've seen him interviewed multiple times on different YouTube channels, and he's just fantastic. He shows you how to negotiate everything in your life. Everything in your life really does come down to negotiation. But here's just one page out of his book, and it's from a segment he calls "Calm the Schizophrenic." He said, most people approach negotiations so preoccupied by the arguments that support their position that they are unable to listen attentively. In one of the most cited research papers in psychology, George A. Miller persuasively put forth the idea that we can process only about 7 pieces of information in our conscious mind at any given moment. In other words, we are easily overwhelmed. For those people who view negotiation as a battle of arguments, it's the voices in their own head that are overwhelming them. When they're not talking, they're thinking about their arguments. And when they are talking, they're making their arguments. Often, those on both sides of the table are doing the same thing. So you have what I call a state of schizophrenia. Everyone just listening to the voice in their head, and not well, because they're doing 7 or 8 other things at the same time. It may look like there are only 2 people in a conversation, but really it's more like 4 people all talking at once. There's only one powerful way to quiet the voice in your head, and the voice in your head, let me say that again, George. There's one powerful way to quiet the voice in your head and the voice in your head at the same time. For some reason in my head, as I'm saying it out loud, it's not making sense to me. Anyway, he says, treat 2 schizophrenics with just 1 pill. Instead of prioritizing your argument, in fact, instead of doing anything at all in the early goings about what you're going to say, make your sole and all-encompassing focus the other person and what they have to say. In that mode of true active listening, aided by the tactics you'll learn in the following chapters, you'll disarm your counterpart. You'll make them feel safe. The voice in their head will begin to quiet down. The goal is to identify what your counterparts actually need, momentarily, emotionally, or otherwise, and get them feeling safe enough to talk and talk some more about what they want. The latter will help you discover the former. Wants are easy to talk about. representing the aspiration of getting our way and sustaining any illusion of control we have as we begin to negotiate. Needs imply survival, the very minimum required to make us act, and so makes us vulnerable. But neither wants nor needs are where we start. It begins with listening, making it about the other people, validating their emotions, and creating enough trust and safety for a real conversation to begin. I was real torn as to which page I was going to read in this, because there's another one where he talks about getting people to say no rather than yes. But I highly recommend this book. Of course, I'll make the disclaimer that I am not an affiliate of anybody. I'm not being sponsored by anybody, of course, but this book is so good. I'm only like 112 pages into it, and this is one of those books you're going to want to read. Yeah, you're going to want to read it over and over again. Fantastic. It's all about how everything in life is about the negotiation. So he tries to help you negotiate everything from a hostage situation all the way down to buying a car and interpersonal relationships within your own marriage and so on and so forth. So I like it a lot. I suggest it.
Excellent. I like that. Someone just said books and beards. Sounds like it might be maybe a whole new series. Who knows? You never know, right?
That's a good title. That's a really good title. You know, George, I got to come back. The reason why is because Monday I'm starting this book, the Thomas Sowell Reader.
Oh yeah.
Okay. This is you know who Thomas Sowell is, right?
I sure do.
Oh man, that guy is a gold mine, isn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is amazing.
He's in his 90s and he's still going strong.
He is. I love his stuff. Well, definitely, we're going to have to do this again. This was fun. I can't believe we've been on the air for about 2 hours now. It went by like it was just 5 minutes. So
I had a blast.
Tell the audience where they can find you. How can they find out more of Greg Boswell?
Well, you can find me on YouTube. I'm real easy to find. All you have to do is punch in Greg Boswell, and I show right up. Same thing with Instagram. I don't post as much on Instagram as I used to, or even Facebook. You can follow me on Facebook under the same name. It's just that easy on all 3 platforms. It's just Greg Boswell. So I hope to be getting more content out here on YouTube in the near future, and especially where reading stuff is concerned. And another thing I'm thinking about doing, George, is on the topic of books is actually doing like a book giveaway, where I personally send it with a note written on the inside of it to prompt people to read more after I'm making suggestions.
That is brilliant. We'll see how that goes.
But hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons why I was reading to my audience on Friday nights, reading 19th century science fiction. And people would say to me, well, are you going to finish reading the book The Time Machine by H.G. Wells? And I said, well, I read you 6 chapters of it. Now you need to order it and get it and finish it on your own. So hopefully this kind of sparked something inside people, especially people who haven't read much, or they might be adults and, the last time they read were when they were forced to read something, in high school or something like that, and they haven't read much, or they've gotten sucked into the digital age so much that they watch more videos. They don't own any books, or maybe they only read magazines or things like that. I think, let me just ask you this one last question. Do you think that talking about reading like this, do you think we can help light a fire under people to get them to read more?
Oh, I'm pretty sure because I know what it does to me. I may fall out of the habit. Oh, I wouldn't say I fall out of the habit. I may get a little slack in my reading. And all I've got to do is turn it on someplace where somebody talks about reading and what they read, and I'm like, oh, I've got to go pick up a book. I've got to go home and read. I've got to go do that right now. So I can't be the only one. And I'm sure there's other people out there that have no idea how much they could get out of reading or what kind of reader they could be, until they're encouraged to do so. And I would say, I would go so far, George, to say we could probably encourage that a little bit more, fan the flame. Consider this, that you and I could suggest a book, read it, and collectively get together with our audience and have this discussion about kind of like our own little book club. We don't have to do it, but it's a consideration. That might get a lot of guys talking, and who knows what could grow out of that.
You know what? I think Books and Beards might be a whole series. It could end up literally being a series. I know Fox Day has the C.S. Lewis book club. And
oh, really?
He's probably my favorite author of all time, followed by Christopher Morley. Let me ask you this. I know we're going to be ending this, but I'll ask you this. Tell me your favorite authors.
My favorite fictional writer, if you want, I think of it as more literature, because fiction is such a broad description, but literature, W. Somerset Maugham. George, I cannot tell you how meaningful his writings are. He wrote a book called The Razor's Edge of Human Bondage. He wrote I wish I had him here, I'd show you. I bought these 2 thick volumes of his short stories at an antique store. These are old books, and the short stories are like 3-4 pages long. Some of the richest content you'll ever set your eyes on. He's my favorite author. I mean, just his writings resonate with me so personally. Nonfiction, he only wrote 1 book. That would be Ernest Shackleton. It was his journals of when he went to the South Pole. With the exception of maybe William George Jordan, who wrote a small handful of books, which I've been reading his stuff on YouTube. But those are very heavy. That's very heavy reading. As far as like history, like real life stuff, I really like David McCullough, who wrote, who writes a lot of these books. Like one of my favorite ones he wrote is,
1776.
That's a good
book.
The
Miracle in Philadelphia.
Have you read The Path Between the Seas?
No.
It's about the building of the Panama Canal. Fantastic book by McCullough. So he's probably my favorite writer as far as that goes, that I can think of right off the bat. I say that now. If you ask me next week, it might be a different name. Who knows? But I see that one of our viewers knows who Mom is.
Yes. Well, you prompted me to kind of search my bookshelf, and because I do have a like the works of Mom. I have a complete works of Mom. Yeah, I do. And now I got to pull it out again and blow the dust off of it.
Oh, so good, George. I mean, seriously, man. If I was stranded on a desert island and I could only have the writings of one author, it'd be W. Somerset Maugham.
Magnificent.
He's so good. And it's good to see. I mean, I love seeing that one of our viewers, Lord Hogarth. I love seeing that. He knows what that is. You can't hardly find his books in bookstores. For some reason, I don't know who he is. That's a tragedy.
Right.
But yeah.
And you recommended a YouTube channel, R.C. Walden. Is that
R.C. are his initials, R and C. R.C.
Yes.
Walden is W-A-L-D-U-N.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a young guy, very young guy, like a college student. But I think he's brilliant. I love his videos, man. He's the kind of guy that even though we're a couple generations apart, I want him to be my friend. You'd like him to.
Well, all right. So here's my thing. I think on the next episode of Books and Beards, maybe we'll have a three-way conversation with George Bruno, Greg Boswell, and R.C. Walden.
Yeah, man, I would be ecstatic about that.
That would be kind of fun.
He seems like the nicest. I want to call him a kid. I guess I'm at that age, George, where I can start saying that. I want to call him a kid.
Yeah.
But he's a young man.
Yeah. Well, maybe
that would be nice.
Maybe I'll reach out to him and just see if he would like to join us. You know, and I'll send him a link to this broadcast and see what he thinks.
Oh, you would not regret it. I don't think you'd regret it at all. He's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Watch his stuff. Let me know what you think, because
I will.
He creates very good content.
I will do that. Yeah. Well, I think this is episode 1 of Books and Beards. And, you know, actually, one of my, another favorite YouTube channel of mine is Bikes and Beards. And it's these guys it's a motorcycle channel. And I watch a lot of motorcycle channels, moto vlogging, that kind of thing. And their channel's called Bikes and Beards. So I think Books and Beards, like I said, this is the first official episode of Books and Beards.
And it's not taken. I don't see anybody else doing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think, excellent. I think that'll work.
It's been excellent. It's been excellent having you on. We're going to do it again. I will be contacting you via email, and we'll go from there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your information, links to your YouTube channel, even though people are probably already looking at it. I will put the links to your information, in the description of this video, either tonight or tomorrow, so people can follow you and kind of catch the fire of reading. So excellent.
Well, everybody knows I talk about you a lot, so your name comes up. Yeah.
It's been excellent having you on, and we'll do it again. And I will be in touch with you real soon, Greg. Thank you so much for a great Saturday evening on the first official episode of Books and Beards. Thank you, Greg.
Sounds great, man. Thanks for having me on, George.
Alrighty.
All right.